The rumors of humanity begin as a whisper, carried through the trade halls of the Velan Dominion, where merchants talk between deals and soldiers laugh at the old stories of a species that once burned across the stars and vanished without leaving. A trace, yet something inside those words unsettles even the proudest officer, because myths are born from fragments of truth. And in the silence beyond the border there are echoes no one dares to follow. The Dominion has grown arrogant, they believe. The frontier is theirs alone, ruled by their war fleets and bound by their laws. But deep scanners begin to flicker. Strange readings are caught, then lost again. And the old navigational satellites hum with patterns no one remembers programming Rix. A young scout officer posted at the edge of known space stares at the data with unease. He feels the pulse of something ancient moving beneath the quiet, like the breath of a beast waking from long sleep. He sends a report to his superior but receives only laughter and an order to continue routine patrol out in the cold between stars. Rix pilots his small frigate past broken relay towers. The void around him feels heavier than usual, like the darkness itself is watching each of his steps. Then, his instruments catch a glimmer, faint and rhythmic, a set of lights blinking in perfect intervals when he charts them on the map. The pattern forms a lattice stretching across the empty sector. Too organized to be random, too deliberate to be natural. It reminds him of old starway designs recorded in Dominion archives, ancient human travel networks long dismissed as legends. He zooms the feed and notices metallic shapes adrift around the beacons. They look like dormant satellites, their hulls, burned by centuries, but one of them suddenly turns its antenna toward his ship as if recognizing him. Rix's heart pounds, and he backs away, sending another emergency ping. But again, command ignores him, saying, "Myths don't answer." Hails that night. He dreams of voices carried on static whispering through his comms the next morning. The sensors scream the lattice has come alive. Beams of blue light stretch between the old satellites, connecting into vast corridors, and through those corridors, something begins to emerge. Slow, deliberate, immense. First come the outlines of ships larger than any Dominion dreadnoughts. Their hulls sleek and dark, with a faint glow like fire beneath ice. Each one bears the same emblem, a star enclosed by a broken circle, the mark described in every forbidden story. The mark of humans. The scanners cannot measure the power signatures they overload with each pulse. Rix watches as more shapes slide out of the void in perfect formation, hundreds of them moving, like one thought. He opens every channel, begging for response. The silence breaks with a single voice, calm, steady. "This is the Starborn Commonwealth we are passing through to reclaim what was lost, return our people, and we will not interfere." The message loops, then fades. The Dominion Border Command finally reacts, scrambling fleets and demanding explanations. No one knows what to believe, because every historian taught that humans destroyed themselves millennia ago, burned by their own wars, leaving only ruins and ghosts. Yet the ghosts now move with purpose across the Dominion frontier stations. Panic merchants flee and admirals sharpen their pride. The High Command orders Admiral Syraxis to intercept. He treats it as a performance, a chance to remind the galaxy that the Dominion still owns fear. He gathers cruisers at the frontier, painting banners bright enough to blind sensors. He transmits warnings of sovereignty, but receives no reply. Only the quiet advance of the human fleet that glides closer with disciplined calm, like tides obeying unseen moons. Rix watches from his frigate near the front line, feeling torn between awe and dread. He senses the weight of history pressing on him. These are not the monsters of myth, nor the saviors of song. They are something far older and more tired than either. He thinks maybe the stories had been wrong, maybe humans never vanished, maybe they just withdrew. Waiting for the galaxy to forget, the human formation halts just beyond the weapon range. They do not aim their guns, they simply wait. Their ships shine softly against the void as if lit by distant dawn. Rix sees that every hull bears names painted in white running across the metal, names of colonies, names of people, the voices of memory written on steel. Syraxis scoffs, calls it theater. Yet even he lowers his tone when he sees the endless list. The myth stands before them, and it is breathing. Rix whispers to himself that this is no legend. This is a reckoning returning. From silence, the border trembles under the gaze of the forgotten children of Earth. And for the first time in centuries, The Dominion wonders if it is ready to meet the truth that myths can wake when the stars call them home. The Dominion border turns into a storm of movement as Admiral Syraxis aligns his fleet across the black horizon, their silver hulls glinting under the faint starlight like a wall of pride built to hide fear. The communication relays are flooded with orders, warnings, and panic while Rick sits in his small frigate at the edge of that line, his hands trembling over the controls, his mind torn between the duty drilled into him and the strange pull he feels toward the silent armada waiting beyond the border. The humans have not fired a single shot yet. Every Dominion captain feels the weight of their presence pressing into their chests as if gravity itself had thickened. Syraxis broadcasts a final demand for identification and clearance, still no answer. Only the hum of power radiating from the human ships like the sound of the universe remembering something it had tried to forget. Rick's scanners flicker with impossible readings, energy fields that curve space around the fleet bending starlight. Into soft halos they seem to exist half in this reality and half in another. Then the voice returns calm as before. This is the Starborn Commonwealth. We have come to reclaim what was lost. The message spreads across every Dominion channel, as if whispered. Directly into each mind, the humans do not shout, they do not threaten. But the quiet tone carries authority so absolute that it chills even Syraxis, who clenches his fists and orders the translation systems to verify authenticity. Rix watches the Admiral's command ship drifting forward, glowing faintly under its shield lines, the crew restless beneath the strain of fear that none will admit. Syraxis orders a tactical show of power. All ships raise weapons to ready position, and 1,000 blue halos bloom along their gun arrays. The human fleet remains perfectly still, like a mountain facing the wind. Rick stares through his viewport, trying to catch detail on the nearest human vessel. It looks alive. Veins of silver light pulse beneath. Its armor, the structure smooth and seamless like it was grown, not built on its side. He can read the name Solstice Arc. Beneath the mark of the broken circle, he remembers stories told by old archivists about ships that could carry entire cities. Through warp storms, ships that vanished during the Great Collapse when humanity scattered like seeds across galaxies. He wonders if this is one of them, returned after endless wandering. Syraxis' voice cuts through his thoughts, commanding the Dominion line to open a broad beam. Hail a challenge meant to test the humans' response fields, flash across the fleet, sending out coded pulses. But the humans only shift their formation slightly, closing ranks into a shape that looks more like a shield than a spear. The Dominion officers take it as defiance. The Admiral smirks and orders the first volley to light space in warning. Rix hesitates, his heart pounding as the countdown begins. He opens a private channel to command, pleading that no one fire. He says they do not act like aggressors, they hold position as protectors. But his message is drowned in static. The moment the order completes, a burst of energy ripples through space beams, leap from Dominion cruisers streaking toward the human front line. Every star reflects on their blazing paths. Rix flinches, waiting for impact, but the light bends in a way he has never seen. The human ships shimmer, their surfaces flowing like water. Each beam vanishes into reflection, folding back into nothing. The sensors cry out under the overload, yet no detonation follows, no return fire, no explosions. The void swallows all noise, leaving only the echo of failed pride. A single voice comes again. You misunderstand our purpose. We came for peace, but we will not yield our right to return. That calm defiance is more frightening than any roar. Rix watches as faint rings of energy spread outward from the human fleet, brushing gently against the Dominion hulls, disabling weapon arrays, one by one without damage. Just silence blooming through every ship. Syraxis curses at his officers, demanding explanation. The fleet doctors cannot understand the technology. It is not an attack. It is a command. A soft rewriting of physics. Rix stares at the readings, realizing they could have destroyed them all and chose not to. He feels small and exposed, like a child standing before ancient gods. Across the trade hubs nearby, panic has turned to awe. Merchants transmit live visuals of the human fleet glowing with the light of twin suns. Markets stop trading as millions watch the myth take shape. Syraxis refuses to retreat. His voice growing harder, louder, he orders ships to reposition into strike formation, vowing that no phantom army will make a fool of the Dominion. But Rick sees the human ships forming a vast arc encircling them, not trapping but guiding, shaping the battlefield into a corridor, as if offering them room to leave without loss. He understands the message: the humans are not here for conquest. They are here to draw a line between what was stolen and what must be returned. Rick's records, everything, every pulse, every pattern, every faint whisper in the static, because he knows the future historians will never believe this night. He whispers to himself that this is how legends start, with silence and mercy, not fire and blood. He feels something shift inside him, a crack opening where obedience used to live, as the human fleet turns slightly, revealing its countless hulls engraved with names that stretch farther than the eye can see. Names of the lost, names of those who vanished into Dominion space centuries ago. Rix feels the truth rising like dawn. Humanity never died. They only waited, and now the myth is awake, standing patient at the gates of its stolen home. The first spark of chaos ignites not from an order but from fear. A Dominion captain stationed on the flank loses his nerve and fires a single shot from his heavy lance battery. The beam cuts through the dark, leaving a white trail that splits the silence and hits the lead human. Dreadnought for one frozen heartbeat. It seems nothing happens. Then the light bends backward, folding around, the ship like mist in wind, and disappears into the void. The Dominion crew stares in disbelief as their weapons read zero effect. The human vessel glows faintly, and from its surface ripple waves of light cascading outward across the fleet. Rix grips the railing of his control deck. The sensors scream from the overload. Every Dominion ship suddenly finds its targeting system scrambled. The human formation responds not with violence, but with precision. Drones tiny as sparks blossom out of the flagship like seeds carried by current. They move between fleets, intercepting every energy burst, neutralizing weapon arrays with delicate beams that short circuits without harm. It is a dance of restraint so perfect, it feels like judgment. Admiral Syraxis shouts for ceasefire, but his command chain collapses. Panic spreads faster than sense officers scream conflicting orders. The fleet opens fire in fragments, each beam bent, each missile turned aside by invisible walls. The humans move like a single organism, their ships rotating in calm arcs, each pulse perfectly timed. They disable engines one by one, but no life support systems are touched. The Dominion realizes they are being disarmed, not destroyed. Rix feels shame burn in his chest. As he watches the futility of his people's pride, the human voice returns through the calm. Steady, stop this folly. No harm will come if you stand down. Rix opens his comm, trying to respond, but the signal chokes under static. He sees flashes of light as ships go dark, powerless, drifting yet intact like toys held gently by a parent scolding without hate. He runs diagnostic scans, trying to understand the lattice surrounding the human fleet. Then it hits him. The pattern matches the ancient network of refugee corridors he had studied weeks before. Those same frequencies now glow across the sector. He overlays both maps and sees perfect alignment. Each beacon once thought dead, now pulsing alive, each path leading straight into Dominion territory. His pulse races. He realizes these were the escape routes for human survivors of the old collapse routes. The Dominion had sealed centuries ago to control trade and capture wandering ships for profit. They had buried the truth under laws and rewritten history, calling humans a myth, so no one would ask where the slaves came from or why certain families carried names of forgotten worlds. Rix feels sick. He now understands the Starborn have not come for vengeance. They have come for the stolen. He sends the data to Central Command, but Syraxis blocks it, shouting that lies serve no one in war. Rix knows it is fear. Speaking, the Admiral cannot afford for truth to spread. The Dominion Empire stands on the illusion of dominance, and if the myth proves real, every subject race will question the chains that bind them. The human fleet slowly advances their formation. Expanding like unfolding wings, they send pods toward disabled Dominion ships, releasing soft bursts of light that restore basic systems enough to breathe and survive. Even in victory, they show mercy. Rix can hardly breathe, watching what feels like an old story being rewritten in real time. The human flagship broadcasts again, this time, not words, but images. Holographic. Fragments of lost colonies, burned worlds. Children behind glass camps marked with Dominion symbols, faces of the vanished refugees, whose names now paint their hulls. The Dominion fleet falls silent, watching the ghosts of their own crimes drift through space like forgotten prayers. Rix turns off his main screen, unable to look any longer. He whispers to himself that they are not myths. They are memory given form. The political channels across the Dominion explode, half demanding retaliation, half demanding surrender. The Assembly argues over whether to call this invasion or revelation. Syraxis tightens his hold, declaring that no outsider will dictate Dominion law. He orders a tactical retreat toward the nearest defense ring at Karos Gate, claiming it as strategic regrouping, but everyone knows it is escape. Rix is reassigned to escort the retreat fleet, yet he cannot shake the voice that still hums inside his mind, the calm tone of the human commander who could have annihilated them. All in Cho's restraint, he studies the beacon grid again. Realizing the humans had predicted every move, the corridors they reopened run exactly along the old trade veins of the Dominion, meaning they had been watching for a long time, waiting for the right moment to step through as the Dominion fleets pull back. Rix looks once more at the human armada still holding position across the void. Their ships shimmer like distant cities floating on black seas. He sees children playing behind transparent domes, gardens blooming beneath artificial sunlight. Whole worlds carried inside warships. They are not an army. They are a civilization in motion, bearing the weight of everything. The galaxy tried to erase. His chest tightens as he whispers that they are not coming to conquer. They are coming home. The myth was never a ghost. It was a promise delayed by those who feared it. And now the promise is awake, marching through the stars toward the border that once silenced its name. The Dominion retreat turns into a desperate race across the dark as Admiral Syraxis leads what remains of his humbled fleet toward Karos Gate, the largest fortress in the outer sectors, built into the skeleton of an ancient asteroid city. Its rings glitter with trade, stations its halls echo with the wealth of 1,000 stolen worlds. Rix sits in silence aboard his frigate, watching refugees flood through the relay channels. The battle at the border has become the talk of the entire Dominion, and fear now outweighs pride. Syraxis walks through his command bridge, his voice sharp, his eyes bloodshot. He orders the stations to prepare defensive grids using civilian platforms as shields. No one dares question him, though the officers exchange glances heavy with unease. Rix feels the weight of his secret growing unbearable. The data he carries could change everything. It proves that the Dominion sealed the human roots centuries ago and turned survival paths into slave corridors. He replays the human commanders, calm words in his mind, each syllable like a mirror showing him what he has become. When the fleet reaches Karos Gate, its vast structure unfolds like a silver crown around the asteroid. Hundreds of smaller ships swarm to dock, forming a wall of light. In the black, Rix's screens glow with traffic codes and warnings, but his focus drifts to the civilian channels filled with panic. Traders, mothers, engineers, all begging for safe passage through the chaos. Syraxis ignores them. His pride demands a stand. He wants a victory to erase humiliation. He declares the humans will find their legend ends here. Rix feels a cold certainty that such arrogance will destroy them all, because the Starborn fleet moves not with anger, but with inevitability, like the turning of a season. Hours later, the human formation arrives, silent and immense. They position themselves beyond the gate in perfect symmetry. Rix sees them through his viewport, their hulls glowing faint blue beneath the shimmer of shield, fields like calm stars resting on the horizon. A private signal pings his console, an encrypted code of unknown origin. He opens it cautiously and hears the voice of the human commander. She introduces herself as Mara Salas. She says she has seen his transmissions about the refugee routes. She tells him she knows he tried to stop the first shots. She thanks him for that, and then says something that shakes him. "We are not here to burn your people, Rix of the Dominion. We are here to stop the taking. If you can open evacuation channels, we will hold the gate, so your civilians may live." Her tone carries neither threat nor pity, only conviction. Rix cannot breathe for a moment. He knows if Syraxis discovers this communication, he will be executed. Yet the thought of silence feels worse than death. He begins coding a message to the civilian stations disguised as maintenance orders inside it. He embeds the human frequency that signals safe evacuation corridors within minutes. The stations receive it, and lights begin to flicker across the ring. Families start boarding escape shuttles while trade ships undock one by one, streaming away from the gate like fireflies in the dark. Syraxis notices the movement and demands to know who authorized evacuation. Rix lies, saying the outer stations reported reactor instability. Syraxis grunts and orders inner grids to power weapons, ignoring the truth that his shield lines now stand half empty. Outside, Mara coordinates her fleet with terrifying gray small human frigates slide into the escape corridors, positioning themselves as barriers between refugees and potential Dominion fire. Rix watches as the tactical maps show human ships protecting Dominion civilians, a sight so impossible that even the comm officers fall silent. Syraxis fumes, pacing like a cornered beast. He orders activation of the mine arrays hidden within the ring. These weapons can turn the entire gate into a burning trap. When Rix hears the command, his blood runs cold. He realizes the Admiral will destroy everything, including his own people, just to prove Dominion strength. He tries to argue, saying the gate holds thousands of innocents. Syraxis shouts him down, accusing him of cowardice, and orders immediate ignition. Rix acts on instinct. He overrides his security key and broadcasts an open channel to every station, shouting that the mines are armed. His voice echoes across the comm network. The civilians scream for departure, and the exodus becomes a torrent. Syraxis lunges toward him, trying to shut the comm, but Rix locks the console and transmits the evacuation codes to the humans. Mara responds immediately, her tone urgent. She orders her escorts to intercept the mine triggers. Her fleet launches interceptor drones that streak through the void like shooting stars, aiming to disable the detonators before they reach critical charge. The sight on Rix's screen looks like light fighting darkness, pure energy clashing against the ugliness of fear. The evacuation continues in chaos, yet somehow it holds human ships guiding Dominion vessels through safe passages. Every second feels like the universe holding its breath. The gate trembles from internal pressure but does not explode. The Starborn shield pylons activate, extending a shimmering barrier that absorbs the chain reaction. When a small section does ignite, the shockwave is caught by the barrier like a storm trapped within glass. Fragments of light scatter harmlessly across the void. Rix feels tears sting his eyes as he watches human ships protecting people who once called them myths. Mara's voice returns to him through the static, saying it is done. The civilians are safe. Your Admiral's pride is the only thing left burning. Rix looks at his fading sensors and whispers that maybe for the first time in centuries, mercy has spoken louder than power. The explosions fade into silence, and the void around Karos Gate glows with the dull shimmer of dust and embers drifting like slow rain. Rix stands at the viewport of his frigate, watching the human fleet hold their formation, unmoving, steady, as if guarding the ashes of a storm. Admiral Syraxis still breathes rage, his face pale, his pride cracked but not broken. He orders his remaining forces to regroup and prepare for counterstrike. Though the fleets are crippled, he refuses to yield to what he calls superstition. Rix feels the old sickness rise again, because now he knows exactly what Syraxis fights to protect. Not the Dominion, not its people, but the lie that built its empire. Rix downloads the encrypted packet Mara Salas had sent earlier, his hands shaking as he opens it, and a flood of images fills the deck. The packet is not a threat, it is history. Each frame a wound opened after centuries of silence. There are cities burning under glass skies, entire colonies left adrift after the Great Collapse, fleets of human refugees traveling through the darkness chased by machine plagues and hostile empires. Then come the Dominion logos stamped over captured convoys, signatures of trade contracts declaring human survivors as property. The truth hits like gravity, crushing every illusion the Dominion had built on the bones of the forgotten. Rix realizes that the myth of human extinction was crafted to hide their enslavement. He scrolls deeper through the data and finds voice recordings of survivors, one of them a child speaking in a trembling whisper, saying, "We kept the light alive, we made gardens in the ships, so we would not forget the color of home. We waited for the day the stars would open again." Another recording shows the birth of the Starborn Commonwealth, where scattered remnants of humanity gathered and vowed that no species, child, or orphan traveler would ever be taken again. Their oath becomes their law, and their ships, their shelters. They turned war into defense technology. Into guardianship, their dreadnoughts are not fortresses but floating sanctuaries carrying schools, fields, forests, whole towns under glass domes. They learned to survive by making every weapon a shield, every engine a refuge. Rix feels small watching. The scale of it because his own civilization, which claimed superiority, had never built anything so pure. He realizes now why the humans call themselves Starborn. They carry not nations, but memories. Each vessel named after a lost world. A lost family, a lost promise. He scrolls until he sees the ship Solstice Ark, the one that faced the first Dominion volley. Its name linked to an old colony wiped from charts centuries ago. In Dominion records, that colony was listed as a failed experiment, but the human archive shows its destruction ordered by Dominion command. Rix grips his chair, feeling fire in his chest. Not anger at the humans, but shame at himself for wearing the same uniform as the men who erased entire histories. Mara's message ends with a line that echoes inside him. We do not come for revenge. We come to close the wound. Outside Karos Gate, the human fleet releases dozens of signal pods carrying messages across the Dominion. They are not attacks, but transmissions of truth. Copies of the archive now spreading to every public channel across the Empire, and when citizens begin to see what their leaders have done, the silence that follows is heavier than any bomb. Rix watches the communication graphs spike as millions tune in. The assembly chambers fill with chaos. Governors demand answers. Merchants beg for calm. Faith in the Empire begins to crumble piece by piece as the truth takes root. Rix reports to Syraxis, expecting immediate arrest. But the Admiral sits, motionless, staring at the screens showing the same footage. The Starborn have already defeated him without firing a shot. They have stripped him bare before his own people. He orders the fleet to power down weapons, but his voice is hollow. He mutters that this war was lost long before it began. Rix nods because he understands now war was never about who fires first, but who controls the story. The Dominion wrote a story of extinction, and now the myth it buried has risen to rewrite it. As the hours pass, distress calls flood in from outer systems where riots and protests have begun. People are tearing down Dominion banners, painting the Starborn emblem on walls. Not as surrender, but as plea for forgiveness. Rix watches it all with quiet, unknowing history is shifting under his feet. Mara hails him one last time, her voice softer. Now she says what happens next is not ours alone. The truth is free, and that is enough. He asks her what the Starborn will do now. She replies, we will finish what we started. We will open the sealed roads and bring home whoever still waits beyond the edge. Rix feels the weight of centuries pressing against his heart because in that moment, he knows this is not the end of a war. It is the beginning of redemption for both their peoples. Karos Gate looms silent and cracked beneath the dim shimmer of broken shields. The fortress that once guarded the Dominion's pride now hangs like a wounded crown above the debris field. Admiral Syraxis refuses to surrender even as his systems collapse, his bridge filled with flickering lights and alarm echoes. His eyes are hollow, yet still burning with the fire of defiance. He believes that if he can strike one final blow, he can rewrite the story. One last time Rix stands before him, pleading to end the madness, but Syraxis has gone beyond reason. He speaks of legacy and honor and bloodlines, as if those words can rebuild the ruins around them, outside the viewport. The Starborn fleet waits patient and unmoving, their dreadnoughts aligned in quiet vigil over the refugee lanes, their lights glimmering like cities suspended in the void. Rix knows what the Admiral plans. Before the words are spoken, Syraxis orders the fusion of his flagship into the core controls of Karos Gate, linking himself to the ancient defense grid to seize manual command. He declares that the gate's main cannons will fire once more to burn the myth from the sky. His officers hesitate, unwilling to obey. He pulls his sidearm and reminds them that Dominion law still flows through his veins and theirs. Rix feels the moment tighten into inevitability. He can see the fear and confusion on every face, yet no one dares act against command. He knows that if the Admiral succeeds, the blast will not only destroy the humans but also tear through the evacuation lanes, where thousands of refugees still drift. He runs through the corridors as the ship trembles beneath the power surge, the fusion process already binding Syraxis to the gate network. He can hear his voice echoing across the comms, repeating the old anthem of the Dominion. While he prepares to fire the cannons, Rix breaks into the control spine, breathless alarms howling around him. Energy arcs crawl across the walls. The Admiral stands before the interface, veins of light crawling under his skin. As the machine merges with him, his eyes now half silver, he looks more specter than man. Rix shouts that the civilians are still out there. Syraxis only laughs, saying that sacrifice feeds legacy. Rix draws his sidearm, but his hands tremble because he cannot bring himself to kill the man who once taught him the code of service. He hesitates too long, and the Admiral activates the countdown. Outside, Mara Salas sees the spike of energy from her flagship. Her sensors identify the gate's core arming sequence. She knows the blast radius will consume both fleets and the civilians. She opens all channels, shouting a single command to her fleet: Shield Lattice Formation Delta. They obey without hesitation. Dozens of starborn dreadnoughts move as one, forming a vast luminous ring between the gate and the evacuation lanes. Shield pylons deploy from their undersides, locking together through beams of energy like woven threads of light. The human fleet positions itself directly in the line of fire, ready to take the full force to save those who cannot escape. Mara watches the power reading climb. Beyond safe thresholds, her officers beg her to fall back. But she only says if the myth must burn, then let it burn as truth, not lie. Rix fights through the interference, trying to override the countdown. His codes fail. He grabs a conduit cable and forces it into the control core, electrocuting himself while trying to disrupt the fusion link. Pain sears through him. But he pushes forward. The system flickers. Syraxis roars in fury and lunges at him, blade in hand. The two men clash amid sparks and smoke, the Admiral's strength enhanced by the core link. Yet Rix fights with desperation, each strike echoing the weight of everything he has seen outside the starborn shields flare. As the first wave of energy slams into them, the light floods, space brighter than sunrise yet. The lattice holds, absorbing and bending the destructive pulse away from the refugees. The soundless shockwave ripples across the void, painting everything in a single moment of blinding white. Inside the control spine, Rix finally locks the Admiral's weapon arm and slams the override lever together. They crash against the panel. The feedback surges through both of them, and the core overloads. Syraxis screams as the link tears free his body, convulsing the last words spilling from his mouth that myths are meant to die. Rix barely hears them as he collapses, half-conscious, watching the energy drain from the walls. The cannons flicker and die. The silence that follows is deafening. The great fortress goes dark. The Admiral lies still, and the gate finally ceases to burn outside the human shields. Dim slowly, their surfaces glowing with residual heat yet intact. Mara breathes relief through her comms, whispering to her crew that the gate has fallen without death. Rix drags himself to the viewport, staring at the stars beyond the shattered frame. The starborn ships hover in quiet formation, their lights weaving through the dust like threads of dawn. He knows the battle is over, but not the story. The Dominion has lost its mask and humanity has reclaimed its voice. He sends one last transmission to Mara, saying, "The gate is yours. The truth is yours." She replies softly, saying the truth belongs to all who survived. Rix looks down at the still body of Syraxis and murmurs that some legends end not with glory, but with understanding. He closes the Admiral's eyes and turns toward the horizon where the starborn fleet waits for him. The myth is alive, and for the first time in his life, Rix feels ready to live inside it. The aftermath of the battle leaves the void around Karos Gate quiet and hollow. Like a breath finally released, the smoke of dying engines drifts across the horizon, and the great fortress, once the symbol of Dominion strength, hangs. Powerless in the dark, the human fleet does not advance. They stand like guardians, keeping watch over the scattered evacuation lanes where thousands of lights move through space, carrying survivors to safety. The war is over, yet the air hums with the tension of what comes next. Rix awakens in the infirmary of his frigate, his body aching, his vision blurred, but his heart still beating. He can feel the faint hum of distant systems, and when he turns his head, he sees on the external screens the glowing silhouettes of the starborn ships still holding their silent vigil. It takes him a moment to realize the Dominion banner that once hung across his ship has been taken down. Someone replaced it with a small strip of white cloth marked with the Starborn crest The star inside the broken circle Mara Solace appears on the main communication channel. Her face calm, though her eyes carry exhaustion. She greets him not as enemy, but as equal, telling him that the civilian convoys have reached safe zones and that Kairos Gate's control systems have been fully disarmed. She thanks him for his choice to defy the Admiral, saying that without his interference the refugee lanes would have been destroyed. Rix listens quietly, his throat dry with disbelief as she continues to speak about what comes next. She says, "The Commonwealth will not occupy Dominion worlds. Their purpose is not conquest but restoration. They intend to reopen the sealed routes, the ancient corridors that once carried hope before they were turned into cages. They will search every hidden sector for survivors, not only of humanity, but of every species the Dominion exploited." She says this with such calm conviction that Rix feels something inside him soften, a piece of fear breaking away. Within days, the news spreads through every corner of the Dominion. The Assembly convenes an emergency session broadcasting live across the Empire. The truth cannot be buried now. The transmissions the humans released flood every channel. Archives once hidden behind walls of secrecy are exposed. The Dominion's citizens stare in disbelief as images of the captured refugees appear on their screens, records of trade contracts, sales ledgers, and erased histories. The shock turns to anger and then to sorrow. The governors move to strip Syraxis of posthumous honor and open trials against his allies. The age of silence ends in a wave of confession and revolt. Yet what rises in its place is not chaos, but something unfamiliar. Cooperation. Dominion envoys contact Mara Solace requesting dialogue. Not surrender, but reconciliation. Rix stands beside her on the bridge of the human flagship. When the first transmission comes through, he listens as the envoys speak. The word apology with trembling voices. Mara accepts the apology but insists that rebuilding must begin with truth. The humans offer to share their technology not as gift, but as bridge. They will help the Dominion dismantle its slave networks and convert its war industries into restoration fleets. The negotiations are long and fragile, filled with suspicion and fear. Yet beneath it all runs a current of hope. Rix becomes the liaison between both sides, guiding communication, translating not only language but trust. In his reports he writes that the humans do not seek power. They seek belonging, that they fight not for victory but for memory and future. Both Mara and Rix begin to understand that peace is not a treaty. It is a slow remembering of what was once lost. Weeks pass, the wreckage of war drifts away. The Starborn fleet begins constructing the beacon array, a massive network of light, stretching across the border, linking the old human routes with Dominion space. When activated, it will serve as both guide and memorial. Every ship that passes through will carry the name of someone who was once forgotten. Rix helps paint those names along the hulls, his hands stained with silver paint, each stroke a prayer for balance. Mara watches in silence and finally adds a new list of names, not the dead but the rescued. Every child lifted from the stations, every family reunited. She says the ships must carry both grief and gratitude for the universe. To remember whole, when the day comes to activate the beacon array, the entire sector gathers in orbit. Dominion ships and human arcs side by side. The air crackles with quiet anticipation. Mara gives the signal, and the first pulse of light erupts across the void. The beacons ignite one by one, forming a river of gold stretching deep into space. Each spark a bridge between worlds. People across the galaxy watch the spectacle unfold, and for the first time in generations, they see the myth not as fear, but as promise. The Starborn fleet slowly turns away, preparing to travel beyond the rim, to continue their mission of finding what remains of their scattered kind. Rix is invited to join them as navigation officer and ambassador. He hesitates for only a moment. Before accepting, he sends one last message to his mother on the Dominion homeworld, saying he is leaving to walk with the myths because they are not myths anymore. They are humanity, made real again. As his ship detaches from the Dominion fleet, he stands at the observation deck watching the beacon array shimmer like dawn through the emptiness. Mara steps beside him and says softly, that the stars remember those who remember each other. He nods, knowing she is right. For in that moment, the past and the future finally meet in peace. The camera of history pulls back, showing the lattice of light expanding across the night, each beam connecting lost worlds and forgotten hearts, and at its center, the Starborn fleet moving onward not to conquer, but to heal. And as the last echo of the Dominion anthem fades into quiet, the universe whispers a new name for the myth that returned from darkness, the name of those who remembered home when everyone else forgot the Starborn. The stars drift slowly across the Black Sea as the Starborn fleet sails beyond the rim, their ships glowing like moving constellations, each carrying the sound of new voices and the scent of reborn worlds. The war is now only a whisper carried by travelers who speak of the day when myths walked out of legend and held out a hand instead of a weapon. Karos Gate has been rebuilt not as fortress, but as sanctuary. Its walls turned into gardens, its halls filled with children who learn both human and Dominion songs. Together under the same light, the Dominion no longer calls itself Empire. They have begun to call themselves Keepers of Truth. Their ships no longer bear the mark of Dominion, but the shared crest of unity. The star within the broken circle, now mended Rix, stands on the bridge of the Solstice Arc wearing the pale insignia of liaison. His uniform no longer the black of war, but the silver of exploration. His gaze follows the endless stretch of beacons shining across the void. Each one a promise, each one a memory. He remembers the fear that once filled him when those same lights first appeared at the border. How small he had felt and how vast the myth seemed. But now he understands. The myth was never about power. It was about endurance. The refusal to vanish. Even when the universe chooses to forget, Mara Solis walks beside him. Her presence calm, her voice carrying the weight of both command and kindness she tells him they have received. Signals from deep within the uncharted corridors. Faint traces of colonies that never died and still wait for rescue. She says they will follow those echoes and light their path until the last name on their hull finds home. In the refugee sectors, people gather to watch the ships depart, their screens filled with streaks of silver light. Merchants, miners, engineers, and farmers all waving toward the sky. The myth they once feared has become their hope. Children carve the word Starborn into the sides of their small craft, painting it in glowing blue, so the night remembers who came to save them. Even the elders bow when the fleet's signal passes overhead. A pulse of sound like a heartbeat that shakes the quiet into music across the galaxies. Other nations watch and listen. The return of humanity changes everything, no longer the forgotten race of ruin. They are now the example of what survival means. Mercy stronger than conquest. Truth sharper than pride. As the fleet accelerates beyond the edge, Rix looks out the window and sees the last glimmer of Karos Gate shrinking behind them. He whispers a silent vow that he will never again serve silence, that he will write the story of what he saw, not as soldier, but as witness. The stars blur into ribbons of light, and for a moment he feels something larger than fear or duty, something that feels like belonging. Mara raises her hand and orders the fleet to engage long-range jump. The hum of engines fills the air like the breath of creation itself. Rix closes his eyes, hearing the rhythm of the ship's heart beating with his own. And when he opens them again, the stars have changed. The fleet now sails through a field of color unknown to Dominion maps, uncharted, free. He turns to Mara and says softly, "They thought humans were a myth." She smiles and replies, "Then let them remember that myths are only the first drafts of truth together." They watch as the new suns rise around them, their reflections dancing across the bridge. Glass the Starborn move onward, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as storytellers carrying the weight of what was lost and the light of what was found. And in the endless silence between stars, a single voice echoes through the comm, the voice of a child from the refugee decks whispering the first words of a new age: "We are home now." The end.